Welcome back, creepy crew. If you're here, you already know what kind of place this is. You're not here for feel-good content. You're not here for highlights and happy endings. You're here because something about the dark, the strange, and the unexplained just pulls you in. And honestly, same. That's exactly why I made this channel, and that's exactly why you keep coming back. And today is one of those videos where I genuinely think some of you are going to want to sleep with the lights on. Don't say I didn't warn you. Like the video if you're enjoying it, subscribe if you're new, and if you've got a story of your own, drop it in the comments. I read them, all of them. Because here's the thing about these stories. Some don't go to the police. They don't go to therapists. They go online, because it's the only place where someone might actually believe you. Tonight, we're reading those stories. Let's get into it. I've been working as a night security guard at this downtown office building for 3 years now. The shift is usually quiet, floor rounds every 2 hours, camera checks, the occasional late employee who forgot something. Nothing dramatic. I liked that it was predictable. About 3 weeks ago, I started feeling tense every time I passed the service entrance in the back alley. It's just a metal door, 2 dumpsters, gravel, a fence. Nobody should be there at night, but I kept feeling like someone was standing behind the dumpsters watching me. Twice I stopped, checked with my flashlight, saw nothing. Last Tuesday, around 1 in the morning, I finally heard something. Footsteps on the gravel by the fence, slow and heavy, like whoever it was didn't care if I heard. I walked toward the sound with my light up and my hand on my radio. By the time I got there, the alley was empty, gate shut, fence intact, but there were fresh boot prints in the gravel. They came from the fence, stopped near the dumpsters, then turned back. I went inside, called my supervisor, and rewound the service entrance camera to see who had been out there earlier. On the recording, at 1:02 a.m., a figure in dark clothing walked in along the fence, hood up, head down. He stopped by the dumpsters and just stood there, half out of frame, facing the wall. He didn't go near the door, didn't try the handle, just stayed there about 20 minutes before walking away. My supervisor watched over my shoulder and said it was probably a homeless guy checking the trash. Told me to log it and not bother the police unless he tried to enter. But the man came back Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Always the same time exact. By Friday, I was done watching him on the monitor. I went out early, hid in the corner of the loading zone with my flashlight off, and waited. A little after 1, he walked in. Same long, dark coat, thin shoulders hunched. He stopped with his back to the building. I stepped out, lit him up and said, "Security, private property, you need to leave." He turned toward me like everything hurt. His face was gaunt, eyes sunk deep, dried blood on his lips and chin. He opened his mouth, showing broken teeth and bloody gums, then slowly smiled cold. For a second, he just stared at me with that mouth still half open. Then he reached down into the nearest dumpster, grabbed something small and limp, and bit into it without breaking eye contact. I saw a gray tail and a leg hanging. Rat, maybe a pigeon, whatever it was. Fresh blood smeared over his lips. I swore and backed toward the door. He raised one hand, extended a finger and pointed straight at me, not blinking. I got inside, locked the door and called the police while watching him stay frozen like that on the monitor until dispatch. Patrol showed up about 10 minutes later. I met them at the service door and we stepped into the alley together. The spot by the dumpsters was empty. They checked behind the bins, along the fence, even into the next alley. No sign of him. One officer said guys like that hear sirens and vanish, told me to call again if he returned. He never came back to the building. A week of clean cameras went by. In that quiet, I kept thinking about the burglar I'd helped stop at that door a month earlier, wondering if this was revenge. That burglar had tried the service door. I'd seen him on camera. gone down and held him until the cops cuffed him and took him away. After the alley guy, I couldn't shake the thought it was all somehow connected. The stress pushed me to take a week of sick leave, but money ran out and I came back. My supervisor moved me to day shift. Yesterday, walking to the bus stop after work, I saw the same gaunt man across the street, staring at me. And when our eyes met, he slowly gave me that same horrible smile again. I ran to the bus and jumped on the first one that came, not even checking the route at all. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my pass twice trying to scan it while people stared silently there. By the time I got home, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing, just a random sick stranger I'd overreacted. 2 days later, I saw him again at the stop near my building, middle of the afternoon, kids nearby playing. I turned my head and he was across the street, leaning on a pole, staring directly and steadily at me. Same gaunt face, same dried blood on his mouth, like he hadn't bothered washing since that night behind dumpsters there. I pretended to check my phone, called the police quietly, described him, and when I looked again, he'd vanished already. After that, I started seeing him more, at the grocery lot, near work, across the street from my building regularly. He always stayed a distance away, never spoke, never came closer, just stood there and watched like it was normal. I phoned the police whenever I could, but patrol cars always arrived late, rolled past, and found absolutely nothing nearby. One officer finally said, not unkindly, that standing on a public sidewalk staring wasn't actually a crime by itself, though. At work, I asked my supervisor to restore some outside camera access, just enough to monitor the street and stop. He refused, said I'd already been moved to days, that security resources weren't there to feed my personal paranoia anymore. Management emailed me a link to the company therapist, and friends suggested I was burnt out from years of nights. They said a homeless, mentally ill guy had fixated on me, and I should stop giving him attention and power. Last night, something changed from unsettling to directly threatening, and I stopped having any room left to doubt myself anymore. I came home after shift, carrying groceries, reached for my apartment door handle, and felt something wet smear under fingers. I looked down and saw red on my skin, then the streak across the metal where bloody fingers had dragged. I used my sleeve to open the door, went inside, locked everything, then photographed the handle through the peephole carefully. The police actually came upstairs, pulled on gloves, swabbed the handle, and asked if it could somehow be my blood. I showed them clean arms and hands, explained about the man and the burglar, watched them exchange tired, doubtful looks. They bagged the samples, said the lab would compare them with the database, and promised to call if anything matched. After they left, I ordered an extra deadbolt and pepper spray, then installed the lock that same night, hands shaking. Today at work, management basically said if police weren't scared, they couldn't justify more changes beyond keeping my day schedule. I keep the pepper spray on me constantly now, even inside the apartment, and I'm jumping at every unexpected sound. I keep thinking about staying at my brother's place, but I'm scared of leading this man straight to his family. But I know he's real, and he's stalking me, and I don't feel safe anywhere. Not home, bus, or work. It's been 3 days since they took that blood and nobody has called, though every unknown number spikes my heartbeat. Right now it's 11 at night and I'm typing this, keeping one ear on the hallway, one on outside noise. Right now I saw him under the streetlight, staring at my building, and I don't know why he chose me.
4 nights in a row. Same time exact, not checking the trash, not sleeping, not doing anything you'd expect. Just standing there by the dumpsters facing the wall for 20 minutes and then walking away. The supervisor called it a homeless guy and told him to log it. So he went out there himself and lit him up, and the man turned around with blood on his face and a dead animal in his hand and just smiled. That image alone would have ended my career. But here's the part that actually gets me. A week later, no building, Wrong side of the city, middle of the afternoon. Same face, same smile, same blood on his lips. Like he'd been waiting somewhere counting the days. Management sent him a link to the company therapist. The police said standing on a public sidewalk wasn't technically a crime. And then he smeared something on his door handle. After that, nobody was calling him burnt out anymore.
The smell of cigarette smoke coming through my apartment vents did not make sense until I found the man living in the storage unit directly below me. I am 24. I work from home as a graphic designer, and up until a few months ago, my life was stupidly normal. I rent a small studio on the third floor of a pretty average apartment complex. Nobody is supposed to smoke inside. During the day, the place smells like dust and cleaning products. Nothing weird. But a couple weeks after I moved in, this stale cigarette smell started seeping out of the vents late at night. At first, I did what most people do and tried to explain it away. I told myself it was drifting in from the street or from someone smoking out on their balcony, and the system was just pushing it through the vents. I spend almost all day at my desk bouncing between client calls and logo revisions, so I noticed little changes like that. When it got annoying enough, I emailed the building manager. She replied that the unit right under me was a storage space that had been empty for 2 years, ever since a delivery company that used it went bankrupt. That answer should have made me feel better, but it really did not. The smell kept coming back, always late, always when the hallways were quiet. Some nights it was faint. Some nights it was strong enough that I would pause my work and just sit there breathing it in and thinking about how nobody else seemed to notice. I thought about knocking on doors, but I did not want to be the new guy policing everyone. Then one Tuesday around 2 in the morning, I was lying in bed when I heard a short burst of metallic scraping under the floor, like a chair being dragged across bare concrete. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then stopped. I stared at the ceiling for a while, and finally convinced myself it was just old pipes groaning, or something shifting in the walls. 3 days later, almost the exact same time, I heard it again. Same scrape, same silence afterward. That was when I started paying attention. About a week after that, I was up late working on a client deadline, half wired on coffee, when the scraping started directly under my chair. I muted my music, and that was when I heard it. A low murmur of 2 male voices coming from the space beneath my floor. It did not sound like a television. It did not have that echo you get through walls. It sounded like actual people standing on bare concrete and trying to keep their voices down. My building does not have any lounge or laundry room under my unit. Down there it is storage, concrete, and pipes, nothing else. I sat there with my hands on my desk, heart pounding, and told myself I would check it in the morning. So after a few hours of bad sleep, I went outside, walked around to the row of storage units, and found the one directly under my place. The padlock was still on it, but the metal around the lock had fresh, bright scratches, like someone had been forcing tools into it. Back upstairs, I sat at my desk and went through the short list of people I could call. I started with the building office. The secretary picked up and I explained the noises, the smell, and the messed up lock. She put me on a brief hold, then came back and said very calmly that nobody had a key to that unit right now and nobody should be inside it. She sounded more annoyed than worried, like I had called about a dripping faucet. She said she would tell the manager and have maintenance look when they had time. That was it. I called the non-emergency line, but the dispatcher said they would not send anyone for noises in a unit and told me to talk to landlord. Feeling boxed in, I downloaded a recording app and left my phone by the vent before bed. The first 3 nights of recordings were useless, just random building noises, pipes creaking, a car going by now and then. I scrubbed through each file, boosted the volume, convinced myself there had to be something, but it was only my own breathing and the fan. By the 3rd morning, I felt stupid for being so on edge about it. I almost deleted the app and told myself I was turning ordinary apartment noise into some crime movie in my head. I left it running one more night only because it was already set up, and I was too tired to mess with it. That fourth morning I woke up, grabbed my phone, and almost did not bother listening. I set it on my desk, hit play, and started checking emails like every other day. For a long stretch, it was just hums and clicks and the faint noise of my computer. Then around 3:17 in the morning, 2 male voices came through so clear that I froze in my chair. One of them said something about the next target, like they were going down a list. The other answered that getting up through the ventilation system would be better than the hallway, and started talking about which apartments had people living alone. Hearing strangers calmly sort my neighbors into families and alone, while standing under my floor, made my hands shake. One of them said, "The girl upstairs who lives alone and works late." And I knew that was me. They talked about waiting until he leaves for the weekend, about doors that looked weak and locks that sounded cheap when you tested them. None of it sounded like a joke or some dumb prank. These were not maintenance workers or bored kids. They were planning how to get into people's homes using the vents that also ran into mine. When the recording ended, I checked my front door, the chain, and every vent I could reach. I knew if I just called the office again and said I heard something, they would treat me like I was overreacting, so I focused on not losing the proof. I saved the audio file in different folders, backed it up to cloud storage, and emailed it to myself. Then I sat down and typed out a transcript of the important parts. Every mention of next target, the ventilation system, and who lived alone. After that, I wrote a detailed letter to the property manager, listing every complaint, each date and time, the damaged lock on the unit, and now the recording. I attached the audio and transcript to the email, printed the whole packet, and told myself that if anything happened after this, no one could say they were not warned. That afternoon, I took the printed packet, my phone, and the recordings to the local police station. The desk officer sent me to a small interview room where a detective in her 40s came in with a notepad and sat across from me. I told her everything from the first cigarette smell to the ignored emails and played the recording while she watched the timestamp. She replayed the part about the next target and the vents, then said, "You did the right thing coming in." She told me she'd contact the property manager right away and try to get into the storage unit that evening, and that I should keep my door locked and call 911 if I heard anything that sounded like someone actually trying to get in. I went home and tried to work, but mostly I stared at the vent and watched my phone. Around 9 that night, she texted me. They'd opened the unit. Inside was a full camp setup, sleeping bag, portable stove, a stockpile of food, empty bottles lined along the wall. The worst part was a notebook with detailed observations about residents, what time they left, when they came home, who lived alone. Close to midnight, she called with an update. After finding the camp, they'd closed the door again and waited inside. About 2 hours later, the guy came back like it was any normal night. Tall, 40s, backpack on his shoulder. They arrested him as soon as he stepped through the door. His name was Dennis Coleman, and he had a burglary conviction from 3 years earlier. In his backpack, they found lockpicks, a flashlight, and photos of ventilation grates in different apartments. She said he'd used the same setup at another complex a month before, living in vacant spaces and robbing apartments while people slept. Then she mentioned the notebook again, how there was a note next to my apartment number. Works from home, sleeps late mornings. He'd been watching me.
He smelled cigarette smoke for weeks, through the vents, coming from a storage unit that had been empty for 2 years. He reported it, got brushed off, then the scraping, then the voices, and then, on the 4th night of recordings at 3:17 a.m., 2 men on his phone speaker clear as anything going through a list. Which apartments, who lived alone, which locks sounded cheap when you tested them, and one of them said the girl upstairs who works late. That was him. He backed up the file to 3 places before he even stood up from the chair. When police opened the unit that night, sleeping bag, portable stove, stockpiled food, and a notebook. Detailed observations on every resident, what time they left, when they came home. Next to his apartment number, works from home, sleeps late mornings. He came back at 2 a.m. like it was any other Tuesday. They were waiting inside for him.
I've been shooting landscape photography professionally for 5 years now, and I have favorite spots for sunset shots. One of them is River Bend Park on the outskirts. There's a hill with a view of the river and bridge. I got there on a Friday around 6 in the evening. Sunset was at 7:20, and I wanted time to pick a spot and set up my camera. The park was almost empty. Just a couple older people walking dogs in the lower section, and the playground was completely dead. I grabbed my backpack and tripod, locked the car out of habit, and walked up the dirt path to the hill. At the top, I set the tripod, mounted my camera, and started taking test shots to dial in exposure and white balance. The light was already nice, soft, and a little pink over the water. I ran through my usual series, changing shutter speed and aperture, checking the histogram, tweaking ISO. Every few frames I zoomed into the screen to make sure everything was sharp and nothing weird was happening with the color. It felt like an easy session. No crowds, no one stepping into the frame, no strangers asking what I was doing. Just work. About 20 minutes later, I decided to move a bit lower down the slope where there were a couple of trees that could add foreground. I collapsed the tripod, walked a short way down, and set it up again in a flat patch so it wouldn't wobble. From there, the trees framed the bridge, and I liked the way the branches cut into the sky. I shot another set of frames from different angles, shifting a little left, a little right, crouching once or twice when I needed a lower line. I remember being glad my knees weren't sinking into mud for once. Soon the sun was touching the horizon, and that's the window I live for, those last minutes before it drops. I stopped thinking about anything else and focused only on the viewfinder and numbers. I did a final burst of maybe 30 shots, continuous shooting with a few seconds between them so I could pick the best frame later, the one where the light and reflections lined up. I wanted that one perfect combination of light on the water and a clean silhouette of the bridge. When the colors started to wash out and the sun finally disappeared, I took 2 slower shutter shots out of habit and then lowered the camera. I packed up fast. It was getting cooler, and I don't like being one of the last people in a park after dark, especially when it's this empty. I slung the backpack on, carried the tripod, and walked back down the path. The lower part of the park looked even more deserted than before. I didn't see anybody by the river, didn't hear voices, just distant traffic somewhere beyond the trees. I reached the lot, unlocked the car, tossed the gear on the back seat, and got in. As I pulled out, I checked the time and felt that ordinary, satisfied tiredness after a good shoot. Driving home, I started previewing shots on the camera screen at red lights like I always do, just wanting a quick idea of how the session went. I opened the first batch, the ones from the top of the hill, about 20 frames. After a few images, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. In the background near the tree line in the lower part of the park, in every one of those shots, there was the same figure. A man in a light jacket and dark jeans. In the first photo, he stood by a tree on the right, small enough that you'd miss him if you weren't looking. In the next one, taken a couple minutes later, he was by another tree, noticeably closer. After a few images, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. In the background near the tree line in the lower part of the park, in every one of those shots, there was the same figure. A man in a light jacket and dark jeans. In the first photo, he stood by a tree on the right, small enough that you'd miss him if you weren't looking. In the next one, taken a couple minutes later, he was by another tree, noticeably closer. By the third shot, he was closer again, so I pulled onto the shoulder, parked, and slowed down to look. I scrolled through frames, watching him move in an arc from tree to tree until, in hill shots, he was at the base. Off frame, he was behind my back, unseen, unheard there as I focused hard. Cold sweat hit me when I understood that while I was shooting that final burst at sunset, facing the river with my back to the park, He'd been somewhere behind me. I tried to remember if I'd turned around even once and came up blank. Those 10 minutes I'd been completely locked on the camera, not on my surroundings. He could have been only a few meters away and I wouldn't have noticed. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to open the last series of 30 shots I'd taken lower on the slope and started going through them one by one, zooming into the background instead of the sky. On the 23rd shot, I finally saw it. In the right edge of the frame, almost cut off, there was a strip of light fabric that didn't belong to the trees or grass. I zoomed in as far as the camera allowed. It was the sleeve of that same light jacket and part of an arm, his hand just outside the frame. I looked at the ground and roots next to it and pictured where I'd stood. That spot was about 3 meters from me. He had been almost at my side, just outside what I'd chosen to include in the picture. In the 24th shot, the arm was gone. The background lined up almost the same, so I knew I hadn't moved much, but he wasn't there anymore. He must have stepped back or shifted in those few seconds. I clicked through the next 6 frames and they were all clear. No jacket, no figure at the trees. That meant he'd come in close while I faced the river, then moved away again without a sound I remembered. I switched the camera off and sat there in the car on the side of the road, trying to breathe normally and think about what made sense instead of just how scared I felt. Going back to the park was out of the question, and calling a friend wouldn't change anything. The man was already gone. The only thing that felt useful was going straight to the police with the photos. I started the engine and drove to the nearest station I knew. Inside, I told the officer at the front desk that I needed to report something that happened in River Bend Park, and that I had pictures. He sat me at a desk with a computer and asked what had happened, and I explained. Almost empty park, me shooting the sunset, an unknown man in the distance in the first shots, getting closer in every frame, ending up a few meters behind me while I was turned away. He plugged my memory card into the computer, pulled up the images, and we went through the series together while he zoomed in where I pointed and asked basic questions about time and how long I'd stayed on the hill. He came back with another officer who outranked him. The second one went through the photos again, then asked if I was sure it was River Bend Park that Friday evening, and I said yes. He said that for the last 3 weeks they'd had 4 attacks on women in parks in that area near sunset. Same pattern every time. Woman alone and focused on something. Attacker coming from behind. They hadn't had a clear sequence before. My photos showed his approach and how close he got. Week later, police called. They'd caught him doing the thing in another park. My photos helped ID him. Now I check behind me.
She drove home, stopped at a red light, started reviewing frames on the camera screen like she always does. And there he was, in the first shot, by a tree, small, easy to miss. Second shot, closer. Third shot, closer again. She pulled over and went through every single frame. By the last burst, his sleeve was visible at the edge of the frame, 3 meters from where she'd been standing, facing the river with her back to him, not looking up once. She drove straight to the police station, and the second officer who came in and looked at the photos, he asked if she was sure it was River Bend Park that Friday. There'd been 4 attacks on women in that area over the past 3 weeks. Same pattern every time. Woman alone, focused on something. Attacker from behind. Her photos were the first time they had a clear sequence of approach. A week later, they called her. They got him in another park. The photos helped ID him. Now she checks behind her. Every time.
Me and my younger sister were driving from Arizona to Utah for her college graduation, summer of 2019 in July. She was 23, I was 27, and we had decided to save on a hotel and drive straight through the night to avoid the heat, because during the day it gets close to 110 degrees out there. We left Flagstaff a little after midnight in a white rental sedan. Mia fell asleep almost immediately, seat pushed back, hoodie over her face. I was driving first shift, and the plan was simple. I would do about 3 hours, then she would take the last stretch so we could roll into Utah early and crash before her ceremony. Out on Route 89, it got dark fast. No streetlights, barely any houses, just rocks and scrub at the edge of the headlights. Radio reception was terrible, and the only station that came through was a country channel buried in static. But I left it on just so there was something besides engine noise. Around 2 in the morning, we were on an empty stretch of highway, no headlights for miles, when something bolted out from the right shoulder. For half a second, my brain did not process it. Then I saw the coyote. It was big, almost the size of a German shepherd, already halfway into our lane and moving fast across the beams. I slammed the brakes, both hands locked on the wheel. The tires screeched, the seatbelt dug into my chest, but there was no room. I felt a thud under the front bumper, and the car jolted once. Behind me, Mia snapped awake, grabbing the dashboard. "What was that? What happened?" she shouted, still half asleep but panicking. "We hit a coyote," I said, trying to breathe normally even though my heart was pounding. For a few seconds, we just sat there in the lane with the hazards clicking before I forced myself to steer us onto the shoulder. I put the car in park, told Mia to stay inside, and stepped out to look at the damage. The front bumper was cracked down the middle, the right side sagging. The hood on that side was dented and pushed up, and the right headlight was completely shattered, bits of plastic and glass on the asphalt. Mia came around to my side, hugging her arms. She asked if the coyote was dead. I told her to stay by the car and walked along the shoulder with my phone flashlight. About 30 feet off the road, tangled in some low bushes, I found it on its side, legs twisted under the body, chest not moving. Its eyes were open, but empty. I am not a vet, but it was gone. I stood there a second feeling guilty and exposed, then pulled out my phone to call the rental company. No bars, no service, just blank. That bothered me more than anything. I walked back to the car and told Mia there was no signal out here. She asked what we were supposed to do. I said we should keep driving until we hit a town and call from there, because standing on the shoulder in the dark seemed worse. She agreed. I pulled back onto 89, drove slower, watching the one headlight. After 20 minutes, we saw a green sign for a tiny town ahead. We took the exit and followed a road past a few dark houses until a gas station and a low motel appeared by the highway. The station was closed, lights off, but the motel window had a lit open sign and a lamp on inside. We parked and went in. Behind the front desk sat a man about 60 in a worn plaid shirt, watching a baseball game on a TV in the corner. I told him we had hit a coyote, our rental damaged, and needed a phone. He stared and said, "Did you take the carcass with you?" We said no. He called it a shame, said the fur was worth money to a taxidermist, then grabbed a notepad and pen and asked where exactly we hit it, what mile marker. I told him it was somewhere between Flagstaff and Page, maybe 30 miles out of Flagstaff, with a rock on the right shaped like a mushroom. He wrote it down carefully in his notepad, then looked up and asked if we were planning to go back and get the carcass. Said sometimes people change their minds after they calm down. Me and Mia both said no at the same time. He nodded, like he'd expected that, and said he'd pass the location on to some local hunters. That out here it was normal to pick up animals from the road and sell the fur. Good side money. For him it was just business, no emotion at all, which felt almost worse than the hit itself. I said again, we just needed a phone. He slid the desk phone over, and I dialed the rental company's emergency number from the card in the glove box. I told the operator we'd hit a coyote, gave the highway, rough mile, damage. She said we had to stop at the scene, take pictures of the car and the animal, and call local law enforcement to file a report. Otherwise, insurance might not cover the repairs, and we could be responsible for the whole thing. I hung up and repeated all that to Mia. She swore under her breath, but said it made sense. Paying for the car out of pocket would be worse than going back. We thanked the motel guy and went outside. The highway felt even more empty on the return drive. like we'd rewound the night. When we got back to the spot, the coyote was still in the bushes, exactly where it had landed. We pulled onto the shoulder, hazards on. I took photos of the cracked bumper, shattered headlight, dented hood, then zoomed in on the body from a distance. Mia stayed by the rear door, watching the dark in every direction. When I was done, I used the tiny bit of reception we had to call the county sheriff's office. Their number was on a sign we'd passed earlier. I gave the mile marker and said the rental company told us to file a report. About 40 minutes later, a patrol car pulled in behind us. The sheriff, maybe in his 50s, got out, asked once if anyone was hurt, and when we said no, he just walked to the edge of the pavement, shined his flashlight toward the coyote without going down to it, and went back to his car. He filled out a single-page form inside, had me sign, handed me a yellow copy through the window, said we were good to go, and drove off. No, drive safe. No, you okay. Nothing. Just pure routine. We got back on the road and reached Utah around 6 in the morning. The sky was getting lighter, but neither of us could sleep. We kept circling around how both men had reacted, like the only interesting part was the animal. Not the fact 2 people in a small car hit something at highway speed. Later that morning, after a quick shower at my aunt's, we took the rental to the Salt Lake Airport office. The manager walked around with a clipboard, checked the photos and the sheriff's report, and said insurance would cover about 80% and we'd owe a $200 deductible. Honestly, we were just relieved it wasn't worse. Mia went to her graduation events, and we tried to act normal, but the whole thing kept coming up in conversation. 3 days later, still in Utah, Mia's phone rang with an Arizona number. She answered on speaker. A man introduced himself as Carl and said he'd heard from a friend at a motel that we'd hit a coyote on Route 89. He said they'd found the carcass from the location I described, that the fur was in good condition, and offered us $50 for the information. Mia froze for a second, then told him we didn't want anything and hadn't given information on purpose, and hung up. We looked at each other and realized the motel guy must have passed our details along somehow. 2 days after that, another Arizona number called her. Different man, same idea, now offering $100 for helping them locate the animal. She blocked that one without arguing. The third call came to my phone. I answered and asked straight out where they got our numbers. The guy laughed a little and said in small towns everyone knew everyone and word traveled. I told him we weren't interested, that nobody had our permission to use our information, and hung up. I blocked the number. After that, no more calls came. When we got home after the trip, I started searching online and found threads on hunting forums about people with permits collecting animals killed on roads in parts of Arizona and New Mexico, selling coyote and deer fur to taxidermists or tanners, sometimes even working with official services. So technically what they were doing could have been legal, but the way they went about it, how fast our contact details moved through that tiny network, how persistent they were over one dead coyote, left me with this weird feeling that we'd brushed against some small, closed world where strangers will dig through your information and push your boundaries over something they think is valuable. And you don't even realize what you've given up until your phone starts ringing.
The motel guy didn't even ask if they were okay. He asked what mile marker, wrote down the rock shaped like a mushroom, said he'd passed the location to some local hunters, and they thought, okay, weird, but fine. 3 days later, in Utah, Mia's phone rang. Someone named Carl, Arizona number. He'd already found the coyote, fur in good condition. Offering $50, she said no and hung up. Then a second call, different man, higher offer. Then a third, to her number this time. They'd passed their contact details through the whole network before the body of that coyote was even cold. Technically legal, apparently. People with permits collecting roadkill and selling the fur to taxidermists. That's a real thing. But the speed, the persistence, The way a motel guy in a small desert town had their phone numbers distributed to 3 separate strangers over one dead animal. That's what stuck with them. You don't realize what you've handed over until your phone starts ringing.
I don't date much, but when I do, I follow strict safety rules. Public places only, I tell friends where I'm going, I park in a populated area close by. It probably sounds extreme, but it's just how I stay calm enough to go at all. I'm the girl who sends screenshots, car descriptions, even what I'm wearing, then sets a timer so someone checks in. Met this guy on a dating app and treated it like a little experiment. Can I go on one normal date this month without wanting to bolt? We messaged for maybe 5 days. Surface level stuff, some memes. He seemed normal enough. No creepy comments, no obvious rage. A bit pushy with jokes, but nothing wild. He suggested meeting up on Saturday. I said sure, and immediately sent my rules. Daytime, public place, I drive myself, I'm not drinking. He replied, okay. For a second, I relaxed. Then about half an hour later, he sent another message, suggesting this little restaurant on the outskirts, called it quiet and cozy, said we could talk properly there. I answered that I preferred central areas with crowds. I even wrote, it's just a safety thing, not about you. He pushed back, said that restaurant had amazing food, that malls were too chaotic, that we'd be shouting at each other. I repeated that I don't go to out-of-the-way places with people I've never met. I added that if that was a deal breaker, we could cancel. He stopped replying for a bit, then sent, fine. How about that big mall with the bookstore? There's a food court there. That worked for me. I know that mall. Cameras, families, security, multiple exits. I sent all the info to 2 friends and told them to expect a text from me every hour. Saturday, I drove my own car and parked in a well-lit zone by the main entrance where I knew there were cameras. I texted a selfie in my parking row to my group chat. He was 15 minutes late. When I finally saw his pickup truck roll in, old tinted windows so dark I couldn't see inside, boxes piled on the back seat, something in me tensed. It wasn't anything I could point to, just that internal, He got out, looked like his photos, maybe a little older. We said hello, did the quick small talk. Then immediately he said, this place is insane. You want to just drive somewhere quieter? I know a better spot. My stomach dropped. We were still standing near the entrance. I reminded him we'd agreed to meet here and stay here. His face tightened for a second, then he forced a smile. Yeah, okay. You're really serious about that safety stuff, huh? I said, yes, I am, and started walking toward the bookstore. He followed. We ended up at a table in the food court. I chose one close to the main walkway where I could see the security desk. I ordered a cappuccino. He got a Coke. Almost right away, he started again. Why are we sitting here like teenagers? We could get a real lunch at a nice place. I told him I was comfortable here, and if he wanted a restaurant, we could reschedule for a different day in a busier area. He went quiet, looking at his phone. His jaw tightened. Then he put the phone down and asked if I wanted to see his vinyl collection at his place after this. I said no. No excuses, just no. I don't go to people's houses on a first date. That's when he told me I was too suspicious, that normal people don't act like this, and that he'd driven an hour and expected more. I didn't apologize. I just said, you're free to leave whenever you want. I tried to shift us onto neutral topics. Asked about his job, his hobbies, whatever, mainly so I could finish my drink and leave without drama. He gave short, clipped answers, and every couple of minutes circled back to us going, somewhere quieter. At one point, I caught myself wondering if I was overdoing it. Maybe he really was just awkward. Maybe I'd scared off every decent guy by being like this. I actually thought for a second about at least walking with him to his truck so he'd stop sulking. Then he leaned across the table, lowered his voice, and said, "My truck's parked right by the side exit. We can just go out that way so nobody sees us leave." The words, "nobody sees us," hit me hard. There is no normal reason to frame it like that. Any doubt I had evaporated. Everything in me went back to high alert. I put my cup down and said, clearly, "Your behavior is making me uncomfortable. Your insistence on leaving scares me. I'm going to go now." I stood up, grabbed my bag, turned slightly toward the main entrance. He shot his hand out and grabbed my wrist, fingers digging in. It hurt. I yanked my arm back and said, louder than I meant to, "Don't touch me." Several heads at nearby tables turned immediately. A woman at the next table was already pulling her phone out, watching him. A security guard who'd been patrolling the food court changed direction and started heading our way. The guy noticed, immediately let go of my hand, and started talking louder on purpose, like he wanted everyone around us to hear his side first. He said I was wasting his time, acting like a child, not giving him a fair chance to get to know me. He repeated that he'd driven an hour for this. But while he was talking big, his eyes kept darting around, past my shoulder, toward the security guard who was now clearly walking in our direction. His voice was loud, but his body looked like it was ready to bolt. Then he suddenly turned away, muttered something about me being crazy under his breath, and walked quickly toward the exit without looking back. I stayed where I was, standing for a second, then sat back down in the same chair. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the cappuccino cup with both of them to keep it from rattling. I decided I wasn't going to rush out right after him and risk bumping into him again in the parking lot, so I made myself stay put. I shot a quick message to my friends in our group chat, told them what had just happened, gave his name from the app and a short description of his clothes and truck. One of them asked if they needed to call mall security. I replied that a guard was already on his way over and that I was still in the food court, around plenty of people. Just typing it out and seeing their replies come in helped steady me. The guard reached my table a moment later and asked, "Are you okay? Do you know that guy? Do you need any help?" I explained it basically the same way I'm writing it now. We met through an app. He kept pushing to go somewhere else. I said no. He tried to get me to leave through a side exit, and when I told him I was leaving alone, he grabbed my wrist. I told the guard I didn't want to blow it up into something huge, but I wanted someone official to know in case the guy was still hanging around or waited outside. The guard nodded, said I did the right thing by speaking up, and offered to walk me to my car right then. I thought about it, and told him I'd rather wait a bit and make sure the guy had actually left the area, because the last thing I wanted was for him to see me being escorted and decide to hang around out of spite. The guard said he understood, that he'd check the nearby exits and keep an eye on things, and that I should flag him or the desk if I saw the guy again. Knowing someone in a uniform knew what had happened made me feel a little less like I was overreacting. I sat there another while, finishing my cappuccino slowly, focusing on my breathing until my hands finally stopped shaking as much. After the guard stepped away, the woman from the next table came over and asked if I was okay. She said she'd seen everything from the moment he grabbed my wrist, that she'd already had her phone in her hand ready to call someone if he didn't let go. She told me very directly that if I needed a witness or wanted to file a police report, she was willing to back me up and write a statement. Hearing her say, "I saw him grab you, you didn't imagine that," did more for me than she probably realizes. I thanked her several times and told her that just knowing she'd noticed and was willing to help already meant a lot. I ended up staying there close to half an hour after he left, just sitting at the table, answering my friends' messages, and waiting until I felt calm enough to walk out. When I finally decided to leave, nothing else happened. No sign of his truck near the entrance I used, no one following me. I got in my car, locked the doors right away, and drove home. About an hour later, when I was already back in my apartment with the deadbolt on, my phone buzzed with a long message from his number. It was basically one big paragraph full of accusations about how paranoid I was, how I'd made a scene for no reason, how I'd missed out on a good guy, and that women like me don't want anyone normal if we behave like this. I didn't bother reading it all the way through. I skimmed enough to see where it was going, took a quick screenshot for my records out of habit, then blocked his number and deleted him from every app. I don't know what would have happened if I'd agreed to walk to that side exit, or stand by his truck, or drive to his house like he kept hinting. I'm grateful I trusted my instinct, even in that moment where I started wondering if I was being dramatic. The way he kept pushing past what I'd clearly said were my limits. The way he framed it as us needing to leave so nobody would see. The way his first reaction to me leaving was to grab my wrist instead of just letting me go. None of that is normal, and none of that is safe. People tell me I'm too cautious, that I make dating harder than it has to be, that I scare good guys away with all my rules. But I'd rather be the woman who annoys someone by insisting on public places and backup plans than the woman who ignores those bad feelings and ends up in a car she can't get out of. If someone can't respect basic safety boundaries on a first meeting, that already tells you everything you need to know about them. Trust your gut. Say no as early and as clearly as you need to, and don't let anyone make you feel crazy for wanting to stay alive and get home.
Every single rule she had, public place, drive herself, no alcohol, friends on check-in, he pushed against every single one of them. Quiet restaurant on the outskirts. Then the food court was too chaotic. Then the vinyl collection at his place. And when none of that worked, my truck's parked by the side exit. We can go out that way so nobody sees us leave. Nobody sees us leave. There is no normal reason to say it like that. She put her cup down and said exactly what she needed to say. And stood up. And he grabbed her wrist. Hard enough to hurt. She pulled back and said, "Don't touch me," louder than she meant to. And people at the next table turned, and the security guard who'd been 20 meters away changed direction. He let go, started performing for the crowd. Drove an hour, not a fair chance, women like you, and the whole time his eyes were tracking the guard getting closer. Then he turned and walked out fast. An hour later, one long message, paranoid, made a scene, missed out on a good guy. She skimmed to the end, took a screenshot out of habit, and blocked him everywhere. She says people tell her she makes dating harder than it has to be. Yeah, the rules worked exactly the way they were supposed to.
Me and Rachel had been mountain biking around Portland every weekend for about 2 years. It was our thing, kept us in shape, and gave us time together outside. That Saturday in June, we picked a route in Tillamook Forest, west of the city. It followed old logging roads from when the company shut down in the 90s. Grass creeping in from the sides, solid gravel in the middle. We got there around 10, parked my silver Ford F-150 in a dirt pullout by a faded wooden sign that said, Trail 34B. I was checking tire pressure on my Trek while Rachel set up the GPS so we wouldn't miss any forks, and we didn't really notice the other car until it was already parked. It was a dark blue Honda Accord sedan, early 2000s, pretty beat up with dark tint on the windows and plates so caked in mud you couldn't read a single number. It rolled into the clearing, stopped closer to the exit, engine cut, and then just sat there. No one got out. After a minute, Rachel said, "Maybe they're just taking a nap." I said, "Yeah, probably." But I kept glancing over, waiting to see a door open. We locked the truck, strapped our helmets, and started up the trail. It began with a gentle climb through pines and ferns. I passed Rachel on a steep section. She yelled that she'd smoke me on the downhill, and for a bit I forgot about the car. Then the single track dumped us onto an old wide gravel road running along the hillside above the main highway. Big metal post, white sign, road closed, no motor vehicles. We rolled out onto it, enjoying the smoother surface, and that's when I heard an engine behind us, low and steady. I looked back and saw the same blue Honda crawling toward us, tires crunching slow over the gravel. I called to Rachel, and we both coasted to the side to let it pass. Only it didn't. It kept the same gap, like whoever was driving was matching our speed on purpose. This stretch was technically closed. There were warning signs all over the place. I raised a hand like, "Do you want to get by?" But the car just rolled, same pace, windows up. Rachel muttered, "Okay, that's creepy. Let's get off this road." On the right, a narrow trail cut into the trees, maybe a meter wide, more roots than gravel. "Take that one," Rachel said, not waiting for an answer. We sprinted the couple 100 meters to the turnoff and dropped into the single track, pushing hard for 5 solid minutes. Rachel tried to shrug it off, saying maybe the guy just happened to be going the same way, but her voice was too tight. We opened the map on her phone and decided to loop back to the truck on a different line, a parallel trail that ran east and popped out at the parking lot from the other side. After a few minutes, the nerves faded, and we started joking that we were paranoid city kids, that the guy was probably some hunter checking cameras. I was just starting to buy my own joke when I heard an engine again, not behind us this time, but off to our right. Through gaps in the trees, I saw another rough service road running parallel to us about 50 meters away. On it, barely moving, was the same dark blue Accord, inching along like it had all day. Rachel hit her brakes and I almost plowed into her. "Holy shit," she said, staring through the trees. "He's tracking us." We both put a foot down and listened. The engine note rose a little, then settled, like the driver was pacing us. I took the phone from her and zoomed the map out. The only real way back to my truck was the main closed road that cut through the whole area, and that was exactly what this guy was driving up and down on the different access roads. Every side road on that map either fed back into that main line or dead-ended at some old logging site. Rachel suggested we hide and wait for him to drive further, then make a run for the truck. And honestly, it was the only plan that made sense. Staying on the trail felt like standing in front of a target. We turned off into the brush, pushing our bikes through branches until we found this big fallen tree. We dragged the bikes behind it and dropped down, lying side by side in the dirt, trying not to make a sound. My heart was pounding so hard it made my vision feel weird. I could feel Rachel shaking against my arm. A minute later, I heard the crunch of gravel. The sedan rolled into view on the road above us, moving so slow it looked like it was barely in gear. It kept coming until it was almost straight across from where we were hiding, maybe 20 meters away, and then the engine cut. For a second, it was dead quiet. Then the driver's door creaked open and someone got out. Heavy footsteps on gravel, rock sliding. A rough male voice yelled into the trees. "Hey cyclists, why are you hiding? I just want to talk." A bright flashlight snapped on, and the beam started sweeping through the forest. It went wide at first, then narrower, then dipped lower toward the trail. I heard branches breaking as he stepped off the road and followed the marks our tires had left in the soft dirt. Rachel's fingernails were digging into my hand so hard I couldn't feel my fingers. I forced myself not to move, not even to turn my head. He got close. From under the log, I could see the toe of his boot when he turned a certain way. A dirty work boot with the front scuffed almost white. In this weird, cheerful tone, he said, "I know you're somewhere here. I saw you turn off. Better come out yourselves. Don't make me search long." Then he started whistling, short, sharp whistles like you'd use to call a dog. The whistling moved away a little, then came back, like he was walking in a slow loop. At one point, the light slid over the log right above us, and I squeezed my eyes shut, convinced he'd see the shape of my face or Rachel's helmet. The beam paused for a second, then kept going. He muttered something I couldn't catch, kicked at the dirt, and the whistling started up again on the other side of our hiding spot. It felt like that went on forever, but it was probably 10 minutes. Finally, the footsteps headed back up toward the road. We heard the car door open, then slam, The engine turned over and the sedan rolled away, gravel popping under the tires until the sound faded around a bend. We still didn't move. I counted to 60 in my head, lost track, started again. Only when it stayed completely quiet did I whisper that we had to go. We grabbed the bikes and pushed straight downhill through the trees instead of going back to the trail. Any obvious route felt like a trap now. Branches whipped our faces and arms, pedals caught on roots, but we kept forcing forward. After a while, the trees thinned and we stumbled out at the edge of the parking area. For a second, I was sure the blue Honda would be sitting there waiting, but it was empty except for my truck. No other cars, no people. We ran the bikes to the bed, threw them in without tying anything down, and climbed into the cab. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys before I got them into the ignition. The engine finally caught, and I reversed out fast enough that the tires spun in the dirt. On the forest road, I took every bend too quick, staring ahead like he was going to block the way. Only when we pulled onto Highway 26 with regular traffic around us did Rachel let out this long breath and start crying. I realized I'd been holding mine too. The next day, we drove to the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office because neither of us could just move on like nothing happened. I gave a detailed statement, described the car, the mud-caked plates, the logging roads, the time. The detective, Harris, was honest. Without a readable plate or anything unique about the car, there wasn't much they could do besides note it down and have deputies swing by that area more often. Another officer mentioned they'd had several complaints over the last couple years about suspicious vehicles and lights on closed roads out there. Locals thought it might be illegal marijuana grows or some kind of mobile meth lab, people who really didn't want company. His guess was the guy figured we'd seen something or might ride into it if we kept going. It's been 4 months now, and Rachel still tenses up every time she sees a dark blue Honda Accord, even in a grocery store parking lot. We still ride, but only on busy trails near the city where there are always people and cell service, and I park where there are cameras if I can. I keep replaying that moment in the clearing when I noticed the car and didn't bother taking a picture of the back, thinking it was just another random hiker. I don't know if the police will ever cross paths with that man, or if he's still out there on those closed roads, waiting for the next pair of cyclists to wander too far in and whistling into the bushes like a hunter after prey.
It didn't pass them. That's what matters. They pulled to the side on a closed road. No motor vehicles. Signs everywhere. And the car just rolled. Same speed. Same gap. Like whoever was driving was keeping distance on purpose. They turned off into a single track. He found them on a parallel road 50 meters away. Same pace. Inching along. Then the engine cut. Door opened. "Hey cyclists, why are you hiding? I just want to talk." And then the flashlight sweeping through the trees. Then the whistling. Short, sharp, like calling a dog. They were lying behind a fallen tree. Faces in the dirt, and the beam slid over the log right above them and paused. Then kept going. When it finally went quiet, they counted to 60 twice before moving. The detective later said they'd had reports for years. Suspicious vehicles on those closed roads. People who really didn't want company. His guess. They'd biked too close to something they weren't supposed to see. Rachel still tenses up at dark blue Hondas in grocery store parking lots. 4 months later.